Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video. Wishing you all good health and peace.
The morning sun spilled across the rice paddies of rural Vietnam, its golden rays weaving through Tet's lanterns, their soft glow a fragile promise against the torment of a secret that gripped Tieu Diep's heart. She knelt in her garden, her fingers brushing the brittle leaves of a damaged onion, her breath trembling as she whispered to the earth, "How can I carry a child I don't understand?" The phone in her pocket, a gift from James, was a lifeline to dreams, to learn, to rise, to become more than the orphan girl who'd clawed her way from a broken past. But now it felt like a shackle, its silence a mirror to a soul tormented by a truth she couldn't grasp. She'd never lain with James, yet the doctor's words echoed like a storm, "You're likely pregnant." Her heart wavered, torn by love and an unfathomable mystery, while across the fields, a man fought fate itself to forge a future she feared to claim. Diep's shack stood humble, its patched walls a tapestry of survival, its yard alive with hockey's loyal bounds and the gentle cluck of chickens scratching the earth. She built this life from ashes, orphan at 10, betrayed by an uncle who'd stolen her inheritance, married at 16 to a man whose fists carved scars deeper than skin. She'd fled, her name her only compass, and found James, his truck stuck in mud, her shy laughter blending with his as they freed it under a monsoon sky. "You're enough," he'd said, his voice steady, his eyes seeing her not as broken but as whole. She believed him, her heart blooming for a man who called her wounds stars, who gave her a phone to touch a world she'd feared, letters she'd forgotten, a screen she fumbled with trembling hands. She tried, her tears falling in the quiet of night, her love for him a flame that burned but flickered. Now, as she worked her garden, hockey at her side, she thought of James, of his laughter, of a company shadowed by whispers, and of a child she couldn't explain, a mystery that tormented her dawn. She'd faced her viewers with a fragile smile, her voice bright as she spoke to the camera, a ritual for her YouTube channel that bound her to a world beyond the fields. "Hello, everyone," she'd said, her hands scattering vegetables for her chickens, their eager pecks a rhythm to her words. "Thank you for your love. I'm still healthy, working hard." She'd paused, her heart racing, and whispered, "I don't know how I'm pregnant." The words hung heavy, unseen by her audience, and she'd turned to her garden, her hands steady as she sliced the damaged onion leaves. "Grow new ones," she'd said, her voice soft, her resolve a spark that glowed against the storm within. She'd fed her chickens, their hunger a mirror to her own, and sighed. "No money for bran yet," she'd said, "so eat these for now." Hockey nuzzled her, his warmth a balm to her torment, and Diep's heart lifted, her love for him a flame that steadied her. But the mystery pulsed, her fear a shadow that clung, and she wondered how to face James, how to confess a truth that defied reason, a child she couldn't claim. James, across the town, stood on a plot of land, its boundaries marked by wooden stakes, its promise a spark of a future he owned to build. The seller, a friend named Vin, gestured wide, his voice bright with pride. 10 meters wide, 24 deep, he'd said, his hands sweeping the air. -4 for the road, it's still deep. Near the school, the market, perfect feng shui for a family. James nodded, his heart racing, his thoughts on Diep, her smile a beacon in his dreams. "I'm getting married," he'd said, his voice steady, to a girl I've loved for 3 years. "I want a house here for her, for our children." Then smiled, his eyes sharp, but his voice softened. "She's a country girl, isn't she?" he'd asked, and James nodded, his heart lifting. "She's perfect," he'd said, hardworking, honest, learning every day. But Vin's smile faded, his words heavy with caution. "Think carefully," he'd said, his voice low. "She's poor, barely educated. My parents would object, and yours do, don't they? She might not fit your world, business deals, fancy parties. She's naive," James, easily fooled. James faltered, his heart shocked, but his resolve held firm. "I don't care about wealth," he'd said, his voice sharp. "It's our hearts, our love. She was nearly illiterate when we met, but now she reads, works, dreams. Poverty's not her fault, effort is what matters." Then nodded, his eyes softening, and sealed the deal. 150 million per meter, he'd said, and I'll handle the papers. Deposit 300 million, and it's yours. James transferred the money, his heart steady, his love a vow that defied the world's scorn. They moved to a cafe, its tables crowded with Tet's chatter, the scent of coffee a hymn to the season's joy. "This is my spot," Vin had said, his voice warm, and ordered cocoa, its richness a spark of comfort. James sipped his coffee, his thoughts on Diep, her laughter a melody he clung to, and Vin pressed, his eyes sharp. "Your parents really object?" he'd asked, and James nodded, his heart heavy. "My father's furious," he'd said, his voice low. "Says she's beneath me, a farmer's girl. But I don't care. Love's not reason, it's feeling. She makes me happy, peaceful, whole." Then sighed, his voice measured. Marriage needs reason, he'd said. Emotions fade, and she's so different, rural poor. People will laugh, James, like a prince with Cinderella. James smiled, his resolve a flame that burned bright. Cinderella's just a story, he'd said, but Diep's real. We can't choose where we're born, but we choose how we live. She's chosen effort, growth, dreams. If I was born poor, I might not be half as strong as her. Ben nodded, his heart easing, and raised his cup. Then build that house, he'd said, and prove them wrong. James smiled, his heart racing, his love a him that held him steady, a vow to win her forever. Diep, back at her shack, stood by her garden, her hands cradling a cucumber, its green a promise of harvest, its weight a mirror to the burden she carried. She thought of James, of his laughter, of a love that warmed her heart but trembled under the weight of her secret. The doctor's words echoed, a storm that tormented her vows, and she whispered to Hockey, her voice a fragile thread. How do I tell him? She asked, her heart racing, her fear a shadow that clung like damp earth. She turned to her viewers, her voice bright but strained, the camera catching her smile but not her tears. I'm healthy, she'd said, but how do I face this? She fed her chickens, their eager pecks a rhythm to her thoughts, and murmured, eat, my friends, her hands trembling, her resolve a spark that glowed. She thought of the onions, of cutting away the damage to let new leaves grow, and wondered if she could do the same, if she could face a truth that defied her love, a child she couldn't explain. James drove to a jeweler, his heart racing, his hand steady as he chose a ring, its silver shine a vow to the woman who'd captured his soul. This one, he'd said, his voice firm and paid, the 2.35 million VND a spark of hope that burned bright. He imagined Diep's smile, her hand in his, a future where their love defied the world's disdain, and drove to her shack, his heart lifting, his love a flame that refused to fade. He found her in the yard, her hands busy with feed, Hockey at her side, his tail wagging like a metronome to their shared dreams. James knelt, his voice trembling, the ring a star in his hand. Diep, he'd said, please be my wife. Diep's eyes widened, her heart shocked, and she nodded, her voice a whisper. I agree, she'd said, I'll be your wife. But her smile faltered, her secret a weight that pressed like stone, and she clung to him, her tears hidden, her love a him that trembled under truths unspoken. James laughed, his heart soaring, unaware of the storm within her, and held her close. I'm nervous, she'd said, her voice soft, and James smiled, his hand on hers. I'm here, he'd said, always. But Diep's heart wavered, her secret a shadow that tormented her vows, and she watched him leave, his truck fading into the dusk, her love a flame that flickered under fears she couldn't voice. The fields fell silent, Tet's lanterns glowing like fireflies across the rural sprawl, their light a promise of fortune that felt distant to Diep's tormented heart. She sat by her door, Hockey's warmth a balm, her fingers tracing the ring, its weight a vow she longed to keep but feared to break. She thought of James, of his defiance, of a house he'd build near the school, of children who'd run through its halls, their laughter a dream she clung to. But the mystery pulsed, her fear a storm that roared, and she whispered to the night, her voice a prayer. Who's the father? She asked, her heart tormented, her love a vow that wavered under truths she couldn't grasp. She thought of the chickens, their hunger a mirror to her own, of the cucumbers, their green a promise she fought for, of the onions, their new leaves a hope she held. The seller's words echoed, a mirror to her fear, naive, poor, unfit for James's world, and she faltered, her heart racing, her resolve a spark that flickered. But James's voice, you're enough, was a flame that steadied her, a vow that burned through the storm, and she clung to it, her love a him that refused to fade. James in his office sat under the weight of a company shadowed by rumors, its promise of rice fields and homes a gamble against a world that doubted his dreams. He thought of Diep, of her laughter, of the ring that bound them, and vowed to fight, to build a life that defied the whispers of failure. His father's voice, sharp with disdain, cut like a blade, dismissing Diep as a farmer's girl, unworthy of their name. But James's heart held firm, his love a flame that burned bright, and he thought of the land, of a house where their children would grow, of a future where love triumphed over scorn. The rumors lingered, a storm that tested his resolve, and he wondered if Diep hid something, if her sadness was more than the world's judgment, more than his father's wrath. He thought of her effort, her journey from illiteracy to reading, her dreams a spark that mirrored his own, and smiled, his heart steady, his love a vow to win her forever. Diep stood in her yard, the stars bright above, Hockey's soft breaths a rhythm to her thoughts, their warmth a tether to the life she built. She touched her stomach, her fingers trembling, and thought of the ring, of James's vow, of a love that warmed her shack, but trembled under a truth she couldn't name. Her heart tormented, her love a vow that wavered, she whispered to the night, her voice a prayer that echoed through the fields. Would James stand by her, or turn away from a child she couldn't explain? Would their love, born in mud and laughter, endure the world's disdain, or break under a mystery that pulsed like a wound? She thought of the chickens, their eager pecks a rhythm to her resolve of the cucumbers, their green a promise she fought for of the onions, their new leaves a hope she clung to. James's faith in her, his defiance of fate, was a spark that glowed, a flame that burned through her fear, and she knelt, her tears falling to the earth, her heart tormented but unbroken, a love that flickered but refused to die. The lantern swayed, Tet's promise of faint light against the night, their glow a whisper of fortune that lingered in the air. Diep thought of the market, of the coffee she'd yet to sell, of the bakery's cakes, their sweetness a memory of joy. She thought of her viewers, their love a bridge to a world she longed to join, and of James, his hand in hers, his vow a star that guided her. The mystery remained, a storm that tormented her heart, but her resolve held, a spark that glowed through the darkness. She thought of her journey, from a girl who couldn't read to one who dreamed, from a shack to a love that defied fate, and smiled, her heart steady, her love a hymn that burned. The field stretched wide, their silence a canvas for her dreams, and Diep stood, her tears drying, her heart tormented but alive, a flame that flickered but refused to fade, a vow to face the truth, whatever it might be.